All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on the overview of AI Builder. We're going to jump right in now and talk about our agenda for the day. Let's see here. All right. So we're going to start this one out with an overview of the Power Platform, as that is the basis of AI Builder. We're going to talk briefly a bit about just some AI concepts, and we're going to dive into the AI Builder itself and a demonstration. So, starting off with our Power Platform overview. What is the Power Platform? Well, the Power Platform is a next-generation business application platform from Microsoft. It is the combination of multiple Power services. Many people on the call are going to be familiar with these. We have Power BI, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. Those services rest on top of the Common Data Service and two of its core features, which are AI Builder and Data Connectors. And the Common Data Service itself as a whole is really the glue that holds the Power Platform together. So what is the Common Data Service? Well, Common Data Service is a modern cloud-native relational database management system at some level. It's more than just a database. It's more than just Azure SQL as a service. It's truly an all-inclusive backend for your business application. Common Data Service is the successor to the now legacy Dynamic CRM data service. And this is what Microsoft was talking about around 2017 when they were undergoing application platform separation of the Dynamic CRM system in what became today now the first-party apps of Dynamics 365 for sales, marketing, and service, as well as the Common Data Service, which is that platform layer separated out. So the Common Data Service allows us to use the Common Data Model to build business applications in a very sort of user-friendly way. And I don't want to go too crazy deep into the Common Data Model here, but just to differentiate it from the Common Data Service, Common Data Model is the relational database schema delivered through the Common Data Service. It is sort of the core piece of the Common Data Service. The service itself is what you use to create data in the form of the Common Data Model, whereas the Common Data Model itself is the semantic consistency and the common entities that come along with any new Common Data Service environment that you might happen to spin up. These are things like accounts and contacts, core pieces of the old CRM data service, but also very application-focused things like users, teams, security rules, this sort of thing. So those core entities, like I mentioned, they come from Dynamic CRM, but the goal here for Microsoft is to really branch out and expand the schema. And the value proposition of the Common Data Model is to serve as this basis for consolidating your business data into a single structure that you can use across multiple applications. So how does CDS hold the platform together? Well, the CDS is offering the ideal backend for your business applications, as I said before. It's maintained and secured by Microsoft, so you don't have to worry about that. It offers painless extensibility and scalability. Extensibility in the sense of, if I want a whole new business unit to operate inside my CDS environment, I can start spinning up the entities, apps, automations, analytics, anything else that I need to facilitate those users right on the same platform where other users might be going about their business and doing just fine. Scalability in the sense that if my company is growing at a rapid pace, or I have some need to add maybe more users or more data, the servers that host my CDS environment, Azure servers, are going to scale with me and accommodate me on that journey as a business. CDS continues to, it fosters data model-driven application development. And this is what unlocks productivity at the citizen developer level. People within your organization who can actually go out and create applications that do great things. CDS supports custom logic and automation through a variety of technologies. It optimizes your storage based on data types. So, we have blobs for big files. We have special log storage for audit logs and process records and this sort of thing. And then we have the standard database storage for your bread and butter, your accounts, contacts, any other data that you might be putting into your database. And finally here, it's got a robust API for integration with external systems. And in fact, it's this API layer of the CDS that allows Power Apps and Power Automate to integrate very nicely with it and sit natively on that platform. And to a somewhat lesser extent at this time, Power BI as well. Not going to get into Power BI pretty much at all today, but just worth knowing that where it's at in that stack. And certainly the vision would be to have all these Power services so natively integrated with the CDS over time. So what I'm showing now is just a pre-recorded clip that illustrates the maker experience. And you might be wondering how we are a couple minutes into this presentation already about AI Builder. We haven't quite talked about AI Builder yet. And the reason why is I want to lay the foundation of what the maker experience is and why somebody might use AI Builder as opposed to any other sort of AI tools or undertaking. So in this clip, you're just seeing me. It's something anybody can do. They can go to Office, they can open Power Apps and start experiencing the maker experience. And from the maker experience, they can start to do things like, spin up a new data entity to capture some information they're interested in. This is really analogous to things that people in our organizations do on a daily basis already. This is like spinning up a new Excel workbook and adding a table to it to capture some data. Except if you do it this way through the CDS as opposed to Excel, this is coming from a guy who loves Excel, there is so much more value to be had downstream from that decision. And so all we're illustrating here is that maker experience, how easy it is to do something like create a table or create a little solution like we're doing here to be sort of a folder for customizations I might make in any given CDS instance. But with that displayed there, I'm going to move right along. And I want to talk about why you would put your data in here in the first place and the downstream benefits that I alluded to just a moment ago when I decide to do something like create a new CDS entity for myself instead of create a new table in a workbook somewhere. And it has to do with Power Apps. So what is Power Apps? Power Apps is, first off, it's commonly misunderstood, and it's largely misunderstood because of the term app. When we think of apps, we think about things that are on our phone that are, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, something like this, and these sort of pixel perfect things that we use every day in our life, this sort of thing. Power Apps is much less about, trying to be a platform that you can build the next Facebook on, and much more about the democratization of app development as a next generation productivity tool through that maker experience that we just saw a piece of, okay? And Power Apps combines services that have different origins. We have Canvas apps. We're going to see examples of these in a second. We have Canvas apps that come from the Office 365 and SharePoint space as sort of custom forms in SharePoint effectively. We have model-driven apps and portals, which originate from that dynamic CRM space. This was the data model-driven interface of the CRM system, which has now been brought out from during that application platform separation, and is now what we call model-driven apps. Portals are about forward-facing stuff that would be like online in a B2C scenario. And then finally, we've got flows and data connectors, which are a fundamental piece of building proper Power Apps. These allow us to connect to different data sets and automate on our data. We'll see that in just a moment. And they originate from the Azure space. So right here, I just want to give you guys an example of what Power Apps might look like. Here, I'm opening an example of one, a model-driven, or excuse me, a Canvas app sample for time entry. So you're seeing here, I employed a sort of material-inspired design with the aesthetics of this app. And the idea was that I wanted it to be a nice, user-friendly experience for time entry, because oftentimes time entry isn't the most fun thing for an end user to do. So here you're just seeing a basic demonstration of, you know, this sort of bespoke experience that a Canvas app allows me to do. The thing about Canvas apps is, while I can do so much, I also have to build it all on my own, and that can take a lot of time. So for administrative type things, I might want to go with a model-driven app, which is more analogous to those with a background in the dynamic CRM product, is kind of what that's about. Here we see a model-driven app where I'm clicking around the sitemap on the left. It's giving me this view of different data tables that I have. You can see I can click records in those lists open and get a form experience as well. And the last app that I want to show you that just sort of illustrates the magic of the platform to me, and the fact that virtually anything is possible, is this wonderful Power Flappy app by legendary MVP Scott Duro. And basically, all I'm trying to get at here is that you can do just about anything in this platform. And if you know your tools, and especially people in your business know their tools, then there's a lot of productivity that could be unlocked from that. So I want to move into the last leg of kind of laying the foundation here. I promise we'll get to some AI Builder stuff very soon. I'm going to talk about Power Automate. What's that all about? Power Automate is Microsoft's web-native, serverless, low-no-code automation platform. It integrates with hundreds of third-party services through those data connectors that we talked about before. And like Power Apps, Microsoft's vision for Power Automate is to be seen as a productivity tool that anyone, including developers or just ordinary business people, can use. And like the other members of the platform, it's tightly integrated with the common data service. Now, here are those connectors I alluded to a moment ago. This screenshot I was very proud of, but it was also out of date as soon as I took it. Microsoft is constantly adding new data connectors to connect to all the business apps that you probably use today. And in addition, they're opening up the ability for third parties to create these data connectors. So you can have, say, maybe a certified MailChimp connector, or or the addition of smaller scale apps that maybe the Microsoft team didn't tackle, but those smaller companies might want to get on the platform with. So data connectors, a lot of power, and the ability to make this platform not be just standalone and isolated, which is no better than an old on-premises system, right? But really unlock its ability to connect to all aspects of the business. So I've spent all this time talking about the Power Platform and how it's awesome. And we might be asking the question, well, what's missing here, right? And to CDS, Power Apps and Power Automate, those are solving a lot of problems already. But what problems aren't solved by those things? Well, I have a list for you. Anomaly detection, content moderation, natural language processing, computer vision, all these sorts of things. And anybody who's been browsing the Azure Cognitive Services page recently might recognize these as effectively the offerings of Azure Cognitive Services, the machine learning AI offerings of the Azure platform as a whole. And what the common thread is between these problems that really isn't addressed by the powers of Power Apps and Power Automate and the CDS is that these are the type of problems where a person can't simply write out the logic in order to answer these types of questions. It's not to say that conceptually there may not be an algorithm which can definitively determine what language is a body of text is in, but it's virtually impractical to write such algorithms. And whenever that happens, that's when it's time to get AI involved. But I am getting a little ahead of myself here. Let's start talking about machine learning. So what is machine learning? Machine learning is about leveraging what we call learning algorithms and statistical models and using computers to help us iterate through those things very quickly in order to solve real-world problems, business problems, and that sort of thing without giving the computer explicit instructions. So these machine learning algorithms are obviously, they're great for problems that have no practical algorithmic solution, like all the ones in the list on the previous slide that we just saw. And there's no accident that the list is that way, of course, because that is, those are the service offerings of Azure machine learning services. So the trade-off, which is really interesting with machine learning, is that sure, we can now solve problems. We can get to a state where the computer can solve a problem for us that we didn't necessarily tell it directly how to solve. It's pretty cool. But the trade-off is that requires us to give it data, historical data, in order to train that learning algorithm. And that is the trade-off there. So the Azure Cognitive Services that I've been talking about, and worth noting here that these are the services that are exposed through AI Builder, which we're building up to. These typically leverage a sort of special type of learning algorithm, and those are neural networks. Okay, so I just want to quickly talk about neural networks. Neural networks are modeled after the neural structures of animals. They kind of work the way our brains do. Each node, you're seeing a conceptual sample or example, I should say, of a neural network on the right there. And each of those circular nodes, they effectively model like biological neurons that we would have in our brain. Now, that's not to say that we're trying, when we use neural networks or machine learning, we're trying to literally replicate the brain of any particular thing, but we're using the concepts that are present there in the same way to unlock this sort of neural network type learning. And fundamentally, well, before I get there, there's some interesting things here. Neural networks start with an input layer, okay? So the information that's coming into the network. If this was a neural network that processes visual information, then that input layer might be the literal pixels in an image. And you might have one node for each of those pixels. If it's the type of thing that processes sound, you might have different nodes for different frequencies, of the sound that's being produced, right? Kind of like the equalizer band or something like this, right? And what happens in a neural network is that those direct and literal inputs are abstracted through what's often called a hidden layer. And it's called hidden because we don't design what necessarily happens there. We have a high-level design of the layers in there. When you talk about deep neural networks, there might be many, 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 many iterations of layers within there. But the tuning of those different nodes in the network all happens automatically through the regression processes that are undertaken when a data scientist type person is training a neural network to get some sort of outcome. And speaking of outcome, that's what the output layer is all about. Taking those inputs and being able to get some sort of an answer out about it. It could be, yes, this is, or no, this is not a cat, for example. That would be a classic question to ask in a computer vision context. It could be a score. It could be a score like, what is the possibility of this lead or this opportunity, let's say, closing? And it might seem like a lot is going on there, and in a sense there is, but fundamentally a neural network is really just a function, right? It takes input, it does something crazy in the middle, and at the end it comes out with the output. And that's the only difference between a neural network and a classical function, is that craziness that happens in the middle is not explicitly defined by the designer. Instead, situations are set up by the designer so that effectively the coefficients that are within the functions that define those neurons are optimized over time through historical data analysis and effectively the training process that we hear about when it comes to AI. So I hope that wasn't too much of a pill to swallow there. What I want to get into now is this question of, okay, so what you're probably thinking is, is this practical for my business? That sounded like a lot, and you're right that it is a lot of stuff when it comes to AI. And so you might be surprised, though, to hear my answer is no, it's not practical for your business, very likely, to invest in the type of detailed AI machine learning that I was just talking about before, in terms of, unless you're truly a massive technology first type of Silicon Valley, Fortune 500 type of company, this is really cost prohibitive. I mean, you need to hire data scientists, have whole teams of people to work on AI solutions to really have a home brewed solution in-house. And that's not something that's practical for 99% businesses out there, right? So that's why we're here to talk about AI Builder and how it can help with this sort of thing. So what is AI Builder, right? AI Builder makes it practical to use machine learning to solve your business problems without going out and hiring a data scientist and a whole team of people. As a component of the Power Platform, AI Builder is native to the common data service that we talked about before, and it's exposed to citizen developers through that maker portal, that maker experience that we looked at a few clips of. AI Builder offers curated machine learning templates and ready-to-use models that you only need to link up to probably existing business process automations that you might already have in order for those things to start adding value. And that's all what makes AI Builder pretty exciting. I want to show you one more clip here that just shows the AI Builder maker experience. Very simple. When I come into the Power Apps maker experience, make.powerapps.com, everybody on this call should go up there after this if you haven't been there before. You'll see that when I go to the AI Builder section, I have some of these templates at the top. So here I've opened up prediction. You can see I've got a very nice experience that's going to kind of explain to me and hold my hand through, what it takes to spin one of these up and start driving value. They've even got examples, so you can follow that link there and get to sample data in a Microsoft doc that'll walk you through it. And even got best practices here. I really love this one. It reminds you with this one not to create a business question, but instead to make sure you have a business question already that you want to answer. I think that's great for prediction. Down below, we have these sort of, I hate to use this term, but the turnkey solutions, right? These do not need to be trained by you. You don't need to develop your model or provide historical data. These are things that are going to work out of the box. Right now, we're looking at Business Card Reader. Another one we could look at, and what we're going to see momentarily in action, is sentiment analysis, okay? So we see sentiment analysis as an example of one of these things is something that's going to look at a body of text and give you a score of how happy or sad, effectively, that body of text was. What was the sentiment? Was it positive? Was it negative, et cetera? And so, with all that looked at, I think we're good here. So I want to jump into the demonstration, okay? So here's the plan for the demonstration. We're going to build a customer feedback experience on the Power Platform. We're going to use the Common Data Service as our backend, or our app platform. We're going to use Microsoft Forms, a great feature of Office 365, to do our feedback submission through. We're going to use Power Automate to expose the sentiment analysis feature of this. And we're going to use a model-driven app at the end to, management experience may not be the right term, but really just to view the fruits of our labor there. So here goes nothing. I'm going to hop out of my PowerPoint there, and I'm going to jump in to a fresh instance of the Power Apps Maker portal. Okay, so, and again, I want to emphasize that this isn't an admin tool that only I have access to. This is something that everybody in your organization could have access to, and maybe already does, if you want them to. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down and create a new solution. Solution's like a folder to hold some customizations that I'm going to be working on. And I call this the customer feedback experience. So customer, I hope this isn't too loud while I'm typing, feedback is going to be the name of my solution. I'm going to just use the default publisher. Usually I could do something like put my own initials or my company abbreviation in there, but I'm going to keep it simple for the purposes of our demonstration. Now within here, the first thing I'm going to do, when we think about, customer experience, if I was trying to capture this, typically what will happen in a company is somebody will say, we need to capture customer experience, customer feedback, and individuals in the organization will say, okay, and they'll spin up a Excel workbook and they'll start tracking that. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. This is a great practice when we're feeling out a data model and a process for a new endeavor, a new initiative that our company is undertaking. But at a certain level of maturity, it might be good to start to formalize that so that we can get the scalability and extensibility and all the other benefits of the CDS. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create an entity. We'll sort of pretend that we went through that workbook stage and that we know what we want out of customer feedback, and we've got some other systems in place to leverage this. So I'm going to give an entity name. This would be like what I would call the workbook or the table in a workbook if I were doing that. So I'm going to call this customer feedback. And I'm going to try to spell that right here. Excellent. Okay. So these are customer feedback. I'm going to make that just customer feedback as well. Leave the primary field as is. I'm going to hit create on this new entity. So right now, the entity is being provisioned in the background as it states up top. I can start adding fields right away, which is pretty nice. There's a few things I want to capture with the customer feedback. I want to capture the, I'll call it full name, and that'll just be a text field. Excellent. I also want to capture the actual feedback text body. Okay, so that's a bit literal for a field name, but I think it'll serve our purposes just fine. I'm going to go with multi-line text for that, make sure we have all the space we need to capture that feedback. And one last thing that I want to add here is I want to capture the sentiment score. I'm going to be doing some work through a flow to analyze the sentiment of these feedback responses. So I want to capture that here, and I'll just call that sentiment score. Okay, there we go. And this is going to be a decimal number. Beautiful. Okay, so with those custom fields added, I'm going to save my entity. And what's beautiful is I now have a table in a database now waiting for me to populate it with some data. And so we're going to do that shortly. The next thing that I want to do is I want to create a Microsoft form so that we can collect feedback submission. Open a new tab here, and I'm going to go to Office 365. Great starting place. Evidently, I'm going to sign in. That should be just fine. And I'm going to open Microsoft Forms. For me, it's conveniently located here. I totally wasn't testing this earlier. But for a lot of people, for their first time, Forms is going to be hidden in the background. So you click All Apps, as I just did, and you're going to be able to find Forms on the full page. All right. So once you're inside Forms, we can just hit Create a New Form. This is a really powerful tool for all sorts of things, even if you just want to, find out what people want for lunch at a meeting, right? But in our case, we're going to do the customer feedback form. And I'm going to skip the description for right now. I'm going to add a text field, and I'm going to call this full name. And we're going to add another text field, and I'm going to call this customer feedback. Actually, no, I'm going to give it a better name. I'm going to give it something more practical, like, how was your experience? How about that? Yeah. We're going to make this a long answer so people can really get wordy about how much they enjoyed our services. And I'll make these both required. That seems like a good practice there. So yeah, we have two required fields. We just need to know your name and how was your experience. So with that, my form's already saved. I love being in the cloud. You can see it in the list here, which is fantastic. And now I'm going to go back to my Power Apps Maker portal to work on the next piece of the puzzle. We're going to need a flow created through Power Automate in order to do the sentiment scoring on the feedback that's coming in from that form. So I'm going to scroll down to Flow under New here, and we're going to create that new flow. Okay, just spinning up here for a second. You can see we're seamlessly brought to Power Automate where you get our flow designer. Pretty nice. We're going to first have to put down a trigger. This is how flows work. We start with the trigger. So what's nice is that we've got a a million connectors here, as you can see. And of course, we have one for forms, being a native component of Office 365. So we have a trigger on whenever a new response is submitted to a form. So all we need to do here is pick our form ID. And the next step that we do is we'll type in forms again. Okay, excellent. And we're just going to get the response details from the response that was received to that form. There we pass in that response ID. Excellent. There's only going to be 2 more steps here, and this is a really important one. I don't want to, there's so much I could say about flow, but what I want to tell you is that when you do this process of creating your flow within a solution, within an environment in the Maker portal and the Common Data Service, you get a special connector that you wouldn't normally see elsewhere if you were just making your flow from scratch in the default environment, for example. And that really important connector is the Common Data Service Current Environment Connector. This is what internally Microsoft refers to as the CDS native connector. And so this offers more features than we see in other connectors. And the key one here that is super relevant to what we're doing with AI Builder is predict. So this predict call is going to allow us to use one of those pre-baked models that we looked at earlier. And just to remind you, let me open that up and let's dig into that for a moment. So when I come to my Maker portal and I go to AI Builder, you guys will remember that we had model templates across the top. These are the ones that require a little work to get trained up. And then we have these straight to productivity guys down here. And these are the ones that are going to work out of the box with no input from me. So coming back now, I want to use the sentiment analysis model for this one, right? So I'm going to plug that in. And it's going to ask me what language do I want. Now, this is interesting. I'm putting EN in language, and that seems like the type of thing that would really throw a citizen developer through a loop. The funny thing is that it threw me through a loop too on my first test run, but the feedback that you get from failures in Flow is so user-friendly. It told me right away, hey, you shouldn't be putting English in there. You should just be putting EN, and I was able to fix it up right away. So the whole experience, you know, bugs are a thing, but it's all good. The last thing that I want to put in here was I want to pass through the response details of how was your experience to the text body here. So whatever's being entered in the answer to the question, how was your experience, is what I want to do the sentiment analysis on, okay? And so the last step here, I'm going to use the Common Data Service Current Environment Connector again. I'm just going to create a record. And I'm going to create a record on that table I just created. So we're going to go to customer feedback. Oops, there we go. Misclicks. Okay, so we're going to go to customer feedback. It's going to pull in that dynamic schema, no problem. And we're just going to put in some basic stuff here. So in terms of the name of the record, I might, in a traditional thing, I might do something like full name and then a date. I'm just going to leave it at full name for the purposes of this demonstration. I'll put full name here as well in the proper field. And then for the feedback text body, I want to put in the actual answer to how was your experience. And then for my sentiment score, this is where I want to get the values from my predict call. So you can see them here. I have a couple different things that it gives me back. I have scores that give me how positive was something, how negative, or even how neutral something was. That's kind of an interesting concept, extra medium. But what I can do is, you know, if the sentiment of the text is very positive and I go with the global positive score, then I'm going to see a higher number, something close to 1. If it's not very positive, it's very negative, then I'm going to see a score closer to 0. And so that's kind of all I want for my basic sentiment score here. I want to know how positive it was. So I'm going to throw in the return value of that global positive score coming out of the predict step. Now, again, as I said before, there's so much more I could say about Flow, customer feedback, responses, and there's so much about how I threw this together that I would normally do better in a real scenario, like giving proper names to these steps and that sort of thing. But for the purpose of our demonstration and saving time here, I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to move us to the last leg of our development experience here. And this is where we're going to go to create a model-driven application that we can use to actually view the data that's being produced from our form responses. So in the name here, I'm going to call this the customer feedback viewer, VIE viewer. There we go. And I'm just going to hit done here, keep it simple. So this is the maker experience for model-driven apps. And again, a lot I could say here. I'm going to blast through it pretty quickly because it's a means to an end for our purposes. But I want to show you how easy it is to spin up an application and just get it going. I come here to the sitemap, and the only thing I'm going to add is just one entity. Customer feedback is the entity I want to add to my sitemap. So I'm going to hit save and close. And that's going to be out of my way now. And you can see that within my application, the customer feedback entity has been added. So I'm not going to do much here to customize. The only thing I want to do is just make sure that on our form for customer feedback, that we can see all the necessary data fields that we want to. So let's see this spin up here for a second. I'm going to drop in my, as soon as the spinning's done, I'm going to drop in full name, the feedback text body, and the sentiment score. Here we go. Okay. So if all goes well, and I have every finger and toe crossed here, if all goes well, then what we're going to do is we are going to see our form response come through, create a record in our CDS. We're going to be able to view that record through our model-driven app, and we're going to be able to view the sentiment score on the form. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm going to hit play. And you can see that it was that easy to spin up an application that hosts my data, right? I can do all sorts of things like start creating new data, import and export to Excel and all that. But obviously with our workflow here, what we need to do is we need to have a customer feedback type of submission. So let's give a submission right now. I'm going to put my full name, Holstein, and I'm going to say that my experience was the greatest of all time. I would not change a thing about it. Thank you, company, for everything. All right. Might have gone a little extra there. We'll see what kind of score we get back. I'm going to hit submit. And if all goes well, my flow should just run and create a record in the CDS. So looks like we had a successful run. And now I'm going to go back to my application. I'm going to hit refresh. And hey, what do you know? There's Cole. And there is his form response. Look at this. Its sentiment score is 0.99. That's a very positive. 99% positive is effectively what that means. And I think that's pretty accurate, you know? Maybe if I had thrown an exclamation point in here, we would have gotten all the way to 100%, but we'll have to try that some other time. That is the extent of my demonstration. And so what I want to do now is come back to the PowerPoint, Shift F5 is what I want to do. We just did talk about here's the plan. That went all right. And so, yeah, what I want to do now is just open it up to any questions from the audience. And let's see.
Yeah, so we have one. Is the AI Builder free?
That is a great question. Okay, so AI Builder is not technically free. It's an add-on to the Power Platform effectively. Users can try it for free. You saw an example of me doing that here in this demonstration. But it does have, it has basically unit pricing for the number of runs effectively. So it's not the type of thing that you would pay for and you would, it's not like a gym subscription that goes unused, right? This is the sort of thing where you pay for units of runs, and if you're actually using those, then those are actually going down, or otherwise they're just hanging out available for you. So that's kind of the licensing model for AI Builder.
Cool. If anyone else has any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We got another one. Will the recording and slides be sent? Yes, they will. So we'll have someone follow up with all the attendees with the recording and the slides.
Yeah, we certainly will.
Another question, is there an area where I can see a list of all the out-of-box AI models?
That is a fantastic question, and the answer to that, let me shift to it, is that is exactly what you're seeing when you go to the Maker portal and you click over here and look at the build section. This actually, it used to be a little more obscure that you could only see these actions elsewhere in the Maker experience, but now Microsoft has done a good job of showing everything that's available today here within this page. So you can come and see the model templates. These are a little more involved, and I believe we'll be having a follow-up webinar to talk about how to get started with these. But certainly now, in the way that we just demonstrated, you can start leveraging these guys down below, these four within your flow. I think even the business card reader in the flow, and then you can even get a business card reader experience within a Power App that, if I'm correct, doesn't even require a flow in order to do its job. So this is everything that's available today, and you can expect to see more roll out in the future, I'm sure.
Awesome.
All right.
All the questions we have, but yeah, like I said, someone will follow up with everyone with the recording and the slides. So if you have any other questions, feel free to either email us at info@arbellatech.com or the person that follows up with you guys after.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Kimia. By the way, feel free to add me on LinkedIn. Anybody who's attending has questions about AI Builder, Power Platform especially. It would make my day to get any questions about that, or to hear any experiences that attendees have with Power Platform, because I'm very passionate about this thing. So with no further questions, I think that's it for me. Thanks everybody for attending and for listening.
Good job, Cole. Thank you.
Thank you.